Hey, everybody, this is Ken Tucker with Changecape Web. Welcome to this episode of the Marketing Guides for Small Businesses podcast. Today, I am joined by Ian Cantle and Paul Barthel, our usual guides. So, welcome,
Ooh,
guys.
thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. So, today we're going to talk about what you should know about Google's 200 plus ranking factors, but we're going to make it simple. Instead of dealing with all 200 plus, we're going to keep it at a high level in terms of categories of things that you need to be looking at and thinking about, or making sure that the company that is doing your SEO is actually really doing for you. So, with that, I got to give a shout out to Brian Dean. He is an absolute guru when it comes to anything related to the world of SEO. And he came up with this initial list of the 200 plus. And then Advice Local's Bernadette Coleman kind of came through and said, these are really the categories that when you put what you can lump them together that really are the most actionable and the most important for most small businesses. So shout outs to both of those folks. So before we get started, let's talk a little bit about, what the ranking factors are. So, these are just really the things on a particular page or website that are going to increase the visibility to Google's search results or the other search engines. And in theory, you should be able to optimize these and start to see, improvements in your rankings over time. Caveat, your competitors are also doing this. And another caveat, Google changes things all the time. And with the world of AI accelerating the pace of change, you can't rest on your laurels. Just because you got it right and you got it good for a period of time doesn't mean you're going to be able to stay at the, in those key ranking positions over time. So this is not a one and done thing, folks. And it's way more complex than what anybody's going to tell you that they can do for $150 a month or $200 a month. This is complicated stuff, but it is, in our opinion, I think, the most lucrative thing that most businesses can do in terms of making an investment in an effective marketing strategy if you care about being found online. So with that, long intro from me today, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Ian. So let's start with what considerations should a business really think about when it comes to SEO that doesn't relate directly to that business's website?
Mm. I assume we're going to circle back to a website, though, right?
Yeah,
Eventually,
absolutely. No, we're not going to talk about websites because they don't make any difference. Nobody needs a website anymore, right?
That's right. So, and that's not right. So, like ranking factors or SEO elements that aren't on your website, there's a host, right? I think it's important too for people to understand that at the core, you have to remember why SEO matters and what we'll use Google as an example because they own 93% of the search market, right?
Yep.
So as of today, at least when I looked it up. So the most important thing to understand is that search engines exist other than to make money through ads. They exist to fulfill your need when you're searching for something with relevant results. And the only reason why Google owns 93% of the market isn't because of advertising. It's because people have used that search engine now for years and years and years. And Google consistently, far better than any other search engine around, and even the ones that have disappeared or the new ones that have come up so far, even when they're trying to, integrate AI and stuff, Google has consistently provided us as users, just consumers looking for information or businesses looking for information, with the most relevant results, right? That's how basically Google grades websites in order to help you rank. Like if you don't have relevant content on your site, your website, and if you don't have signals to your website pointing that there's relevant content there, you will not rank well unless you have no competition, and then must be nice.
You still may not rank well.
You still might not rank well. But I have seen, so in rare cases when I've done competitive analysis for new clients and we're in a unique geography, we're in a unique industry, and there's only a few players in that industry, I have seen very old and very poorly designed and not heavy content sites rank really well. And that's
Yeah.
only because they had, I mean, this is kind of going into what you were asking, but they had their domain name the longest. They actually had a website on the internet that had been around for 15 years, whereas all of their other competitors were 5 years old. Now, all things being equal, if a competitor were to come in, like the client that hired me, builds a new website, it's SEO focused, it's got all the other signals coming from, which I'll explain in a second and answer your question, Ken.
What was the
you have
question?
all the other, what's that?
Nothing.
It's almost as long as your intro. So it's a long intro day. So, if all the right signals are there, you will easily outrank the other business with the older website and with bad content. So some factors, like if we were to take kind of a 30,000 foot view, we're flying over SEO land and we're looking at, well, what affects SEO? Of course, you have your on-page elements, right? You have your website. But then you have other things like your domain factors, like I was just talking about, like the age of your domain. Is a keyword in your domain name? How long has it been registered for? How long is your contract with the company? Because if they see your renewal's not coming up for another 5 years, that gives it greater credibility in Google's eyes. Then you have the on-page stuff, lots and lots of stuff there. And then you have site level factors, things like Core Web Vitals, SSL certificates, all that. I won't go into that because you told me not to. And then you have backlinks and there's different quality of backlinks, but what other sites and who is linking to your website. And then you have user experience on the website, but also user experience, things like Google reviews, Facebook recommendations, LinkedIn recommendations. All of those things are interconnected in Google's eyes. And then you have brand signals, and there's a host of other things. But I think if I were a business owner, the thing I would want to know is it's not as simple as building a website. And just because a company has a bullet point that says the website will have SEO, so many people are lured into that. But there's so many factors, like you said, Ken, there's over 200 verifiable factors that go into website ranking. And Google doesn't tell people all the factors, right? So this is just the industry verifying what they see as factors. And then we in the industry know there's far more than that. So it really behooves a business to understand that there's a lot going on here and that you really have to invest wisely and you have to invest for the long term. It's not a one and done thing. So I think I went off the rails there and I apologize, but I'm passionate about this subject.
Yeah. I mean, well, and just, for you, what's interesting to me is the way you answered that is it took you a long time to get to the point to answer the question because this is complex stuff. Yeah. And, it's not just, any one individual task may or may not be simple enough. But when it comes to SEO, it's really the cumulative effect of how are you doing really for all of these things. And you always have to, like you mentioned, you always have to kind of gauge this based on your competition levels and how other people are ranking. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot here. So
if I can add one more thing, Ken, like this rarely gets talked about, especially when people are thinking about like a website build, right? Is that all of this work you're doing or investing in to help you rank better on search engines, it has to have keyword research done at the beginning. You have to have an SEO plan or you will fail. You're shooting in the dark with a mask on, being spun around 5 times, thinking that you're going to hit the target. It's not going to happen. Like you really do need a plan. And so if I were to, say one thing to any business out there, like don't skimp on the SEO plan and the research, because that is what will guide your efforts and make your investment worth, provide a return.
Yeah. All right, Paul, you still there?
Yeah, I just woke up.
Sorry, Paul.
All right. So let's talk about user interaction with a website or even with a business listing. Is that important? Yes or no? And if yes, elaborate. If no, explain why it's not really something that anybody needs to worry about.
No, you don't even need a website anymore. All you need is a Facebook page. That's it. You're good.
All right, cool.
No, yes, it does matter. It absolutely does matter. And even like your get to the website in a minute, but even your Google My Business, you had sent a really interesting article on categories and how additional categories make a difference. And you have to make it clear to whoever's searching for your product, service, whatever, what you do. And one of the examples is attorney. Well, if your category on your Google business profile is just attorney, well, okay, do you practice every single area any attorney can cover? Or do you focus on certain areas like family law or divorce, child custody, things like that? You have to make that clear. Otherwise, people they're not gonna interact. If they go to your Google business profile just as attorney, they're liable to go somewhere else because they don't know if you're the right attorney for them. If you cover or if you practice in the areas that they need help with.
Well, and that's assuming that you're lucky enough that they even find you, right? Because if you pick the wrong category for your primary category, good luck showing up for search.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on your website, yes, it does matter because, again, when we get into things like, and this is a kind of an area of contention about whether or not Google really uses something called dwell time. And that's how long people spend on your website. And that's where things like internal linking comes into play.
What do you mean by that?
Well, let's say you have a piece of content, you're a roofer and you have a page that talks about roofing overall. You want to link, roofing installation, roofing repair. You want to link out to those other pages and blog posts about those things because it helps people navigate your website. And that increases dwell time. Now, the issue with dwell time, I'm sure Google looks at it to some degree, but as much as I bitch about Google sometimes, they're not stupid and nothing exists in a silo. And if someone is looking for landscaping and they find your business and they go to your website and they call the phone number and then they leave, there was really no dwell time to speak of. Google looks at that as a bounce, but they called you, so it served the purpose. So I'm sure Google uses it to some degree or another. I don't think they look at it as a ranking factor on its own. They have to know better than that. I'm sure they do.
Yeah, I'm sure it's got to be contextual.
Yeah. And things like content depth, and this goes into, covering a page or covering a topic in depth. Me and Ian we're talking about this a little bit last week, where how long does a blog post have to be? Well, it has to be long enough to cover the topic, and you have to look at your competitors, and there's also different kinds of content. I'm not going to go into that, but kind of Ian was talking about keyword research. Well, you have to do content research too. If you want to rank for a certain keyword, plug that into Google and see what kind of content is ranking well. Because if you write the wrong type of content for a keyword, you're probably not going to rank. But, getting into content depth and covering something, comprehensively, if I look up, and the example I use with Ian is how to make homemade glass cleaner, I don't need a 2,000 word article telling me how to make homemade glass cleaner. You need this and this and this and this these proportions, and you mix it up and there you go. That's all you need. Now, if I want to know about how the divorce process works, that should be a very long, comprehensive article, and linking out to other information about that. But Google uses a lot of things in content freshness that can increase user interaction. And Google does some things that are kind of creepy. They use your browsing history, they use your search history to deliver results. They look at your bookmarks. People don't realize it. And this is if you're using Chrome. If you're using Edge, they can't do it, or some other browser.
That just means somebody else is watching your browser behavior.
Yeah, exactly. It just means somebody else is doing that. God, that this could almost be a topic all by itself. But organic click-through rate, Google looks at that, and something they call, I think it's pogo sticking is what they call it, where they click on a result and they look at the homepage, they might click on something, then they go back to the search results and click on a different result. And that's telling Google that the first thing that this person clicked on wasn't relevant to their search query. So user interaction can be good or it can be bad. If the interaction is their pogo sticking, that can be a bad thing.
Right. I guess Ian's ready to talk now.
No, I just pressed the wrong button. It was not a sign at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, all of this, it all obviously it got to be taken into context with, all of these other factors that are going on and things like that. Ian, you talked about kind of the big broad brush of, what all goes into SEO. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the key on-page SEO kinds of things that a business should work on. And, some of these are probably what you're sold when you buy a website is, they're going to do SEO. I mean, usually that's going to be some level of some of these on-page factors, but absolutely certainly not all of them. So Ian, what should we know about the on-page stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the on-page stuff, I would say, is the core. Other than I didn't talk about Google Business Profiles or directories or anything before, but Google Business Profiles is really key too, for different reasons. But your on-page, your website is actually the only property you own on the internet. So you should be very jealous about it, meaning you should protect it, and you should invest in it. And so some key things are, of course, I mentioned it before, relevant content, right? You got to have relevant content, and you need to have enough of it. As Paul was saying, you need to have enough of it so that it covers the topic and sends enough signals to Google. Like if we recently took on a client and their website was very, very thin, meaning, pages on the website had under 100 words of content, right? It was just so thin, and there was a lot of duplicate content throughout the website on top of that. So some of that content wasn't even unique from page to page. So you have to have enough information that Google views it as people are going to find it relevant on the topic that you're trying to rank for. So I think that's really key, just to get out of the way. And then there's a whole bunch of other things, like there's technical things, right? Are you using the structure that HTML gives you the opportunity to use? Like, are you using the H1, H2, H3 tags properly? Are you using bullet points properly? Is your title relevant to the topic, and does it include the keywords you want to rank for, right? There's so many little pieces that make up such a big part. Do you put alt text on your images? Does your website, is it SSL? Does it have an SSL certificate? Is it secure? I mean, couple of years ago, we went through a huge, tsunami of having to move everybody over to that, because that became a ranking factor, and people were dragging their feet on moving to a secure website, because for some at the time it cost extra money, and now it's just part of hosting, right? But but how fast does your page load? I mean, there's so many factors involved, that it is overwhelming for someone that doesn't work in the business. For us and you guys, right? Like when we build websites, when we optimize websites, we're looking at everything that the people can see and everything that Google can see behind the curtain, right? And all of it has to work in lockstep together so that it can send the right signals to Google. So I always explain to people that it's your on-page stuff that attracts it's the gatekeeper. Google's the gatekeeper and lets people be attracted to your site. But then it's the content on your website that engages people and converts them, right? So you got to be very thoughtful about that. Yeah, I mean, this could be an entire talk all on itself. I think the on-page stuff is a big deal, and it needs to be done right. And I think a lot of businesses out there don't have this part right, and it's unfortunate because you have total control over it.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you don't take care of the on-page, what are you really telling Google? You really don't care about your website. And I don't think that's the message you want to send when it's trying to figure out, should I optimize this and deliver this on search results pages for people who are looking for the kind of business or the kind of products or services that you have to offer. You just don't want to leave this to chance. And these are, like you said, this is something that's 100% in your control. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and it's, you said you don't want to leave it to chance. And the thing about that is that people need to understand, like, it doesn't magically happen. Like you gotta invest, just like you would when you have a brick and mortar location for your dental clinic or for your restaurant. You need to invest in that so that, first of all, it's attractive on the outside. It's got signage that works. The door is, doesn't squeal when you open it, like all these things that we all take for granted. But essentially, for your online presence, you need to do the exact same thing. And you need to, just like you would upkeep a real property, you need to invest and have a budget for upkeeping your virtual property and making sure that it looks good to people year after year, and it gets refreshed when it needs to, and all that kind of stuff, because it does reflect on your brand.
Yep, absolutely. So that's actually a good segue, because now I think we can kind of talk about the inside of your online store, if you will, your website, and that is, Paul, let's talk about things like page age and newness of content. Do those things matter for SEO?
Generally, yes. I'd say one of the exceptions is if it's what we call evergreen content, like your about page, probably don't have to update that on a regular basis. If you have like your staff, your team members on there, and someone leaves or you hire someone new, you're going to want to update it. But if your about page is about your business, why you started your business, things like that, that's not going to change probably. Okay. If you have time sensitive content, it matters more. And this, Google actually talked about this at one point, that the more, like for news sites, for instance, freshness of content obviously is very important because the news changes. But if you have a blog post on your page about how to patch a concrete wall, you probably don't have to update that a whole lot because it's not going to change. Patching a concrete wall probably hasn't changed for 50 years. There's different products out there, but how you do it probably hasn't changed. But it does matter. But I think what's even more important than that is consistency of content, and get into some of this other stuff later. But making your website easy to navigate and easy to find things. Page age it does matter, because the longer you've had a page out there, and if it is something that you update on a regular basis, it helps build authority. And Google is going to look at that and say, okay, this page has been around for X amount of time and it's regularly updated and the content is relevant, and that's going to help your page authority, and it's going to help that page or that blog post rank better. So you don't have to update every page of your website on a regular basis, but you do have to make sure your content is relevant and up to date if it's something that does change. And go back. Sometimes you need to go back and look at your older pages and say, okay, this needs to be updated. Most of this information is good. Some of it is outdated. So let's change that content. Let's update that content. There's other things on page that probably don't really want to get into, but things like structured data. You have to have that, because that helps tell Google what your website is about, what a particular page is about, what's important on that page.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't get into structured data too much.
So I'm a little confused, because you used the example of, how to patch a concrete wall, and that doesn't change. But it also sounded like you said that Google does value a page that's been around for a long time, and that you are regularly updating it. So to me, it seems like even if that page, the content itself doesn't really change, adding a link to say, here's a project that shows a before and after, and linking out to some new content, or writing up a new paragraph that describes, how that's changed, is beneficial. Is that right?
Yeah. And like I said, and maybe I should have clarified, because the technique of patching a concrete wall probably hasn't changed, but the products out there that you use have changed. So linking out to a product, you talk about, okay, here's how you do it, and by the way, here's the products we recommend to do this. That's going to change. And yeah, sure, that's an update. I would call that a minor update, but it's definitely beneficial, because you are telling Google that you're updating this from the standpoint of, look, this product to do this used to be good, or maybe it doesn't exist anymore, and this product is better and it's newer, and you don't have to, this product has all the polymers already in there. You don't have to mix two different things, so it's easier to work with. So yeah, things like that. So yeah, I get that is content update, but it's not like you're going back and rewriting and doing a major update to that piece of content like you would maybe with other things.
Yeah, I mean, so in some cases, things are clearly old and out of date. Like, for example, the world of social media. If you were a marketing agency and you said you did Facebook marketing, back in 2010, what you might be able to do and how everything works could be substantially different, today. And if you haven't gone in and changed that content, then that could be
a problem.
That could be a problem for sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. So Ian, let's keep on the theme of content. What factors should people consider when they are creating content and they're developing content for their website, or I guess other key digital properties?
Sure. Yeah. And again, I would always start with your keyword research to know what people are looking for related to your products or services or business. And then yeah, it's make sure you're building out relevant content. But to get a little bit more specific than that, but that's a great starting point. Like, if you do those two things, you're going to be better than a good chunk of businesses in your industry right now. But if you want to get more specific, Google announced, I don't know how many years ago it is now, but they announced the EAT principle, or the EAT framework, and it used to be EAT, which stood for expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And they added in a new E in the last year, and it's experience. And so when you're thinking about your content that you're going to put on your website or other places, right? Because this is how Google views content across the internet in a highly simplified manner, right? That's one thing to keep in mind. Excuse me, is that experience is really demonstratable firsthand experience on a topic, right? So if you're a fitness instructor and you can demonstrate through your content that you actually instruct fitness, it will help you, because Google will see you as having experience in that. And then expertise what your content says. So is it high quality content? Is it relevant? Is it accurate? Right? Google has, Google crawls essentially every website out there, right? There, not to exaggerate, but like most content is crawled, and Google has a pretty good beat on, the sites that matter most, and so it's comparing your site to other websites, especially, excuse me, as you get into your local area, and so you need to show that you have expertise in this area. The next one is authority. So what do peers say about the content? What does the publisher say, which is probably your business? And what does the author say? And so that's really important. So you need to be thoughtful about, how is the content perceived by the people that read it most? And then trustworthiness. What do customers say about the content? And so this is, introducing reviews into things. All of that plays a really big part, because it shows that people trust your experience and your expertise and your authority. And so, those are if you follow the EAT principle or framework that Google EEAT that Google has set out, then it's a good place, I think, to start for most businesses, and it'll help you tremendously. The other thing to think about is when you think about other people linking to your content, that's really important as well. Like the quality of who's linking to your website content is really important as well. So, meaning if CNN, Fox, whoever, some big news outlet were to suddenly see you as an authority in the space, and they were to link to an article that you wrote, then all of a sudden they have a super high authority in Google's view, and they're actually linking to you as an authority on that topic. That link authority basically gets passed on to you to some extent. And the opposite is true, is that if you just have a whole bunch of non-authoritative websites linking to your site, it can actually drag you down. They can be anchors to you rather than hot air balloons or something. Trying to think of an analogy. But yeah, content is really important. And of course, there's also the whole mixture of content now where, when Paul was talking about freshness of a page, adding in a video that, maybe in the past you haven't been big into video because it was harder to produce and not nearly as big from an SEO standpoint, or even from, it was just not as many people were producing video. Now more people are producing video. It's become easier. All of our smartphones can do it to some degree. And so to update how to build a concrete post or something like that, and you have a video that goes with your content, that's an update to your webpage, right? If you add that video in. So, there's some pretty easy ways to do that, but it has to be relevant for sure. Did that answer your question, Ken, or did I just go way off track?
No, I think that's good. So,
Okay.
So, what's interesting is when we write the content, we have to write it for humans to consume.
Yep.
But we have to know that the search engines are also going to be consuming it. And so we got to think about the user experience. And so a blog post is a great example. You want to format a blog post so that it's easy to skim, but easy to drill in and read the section that's important to people, because Google's looking at this, right? I mean, that is going to factor into this concept of dwell time. They may click through to a link that takes them to another relevant article that was introduced, maybe by that blog, or referenced by that blog, and go to another blog post on your site. So you really have to think about, not only the content you create, but how you lay it out and design it to be consumed on a page. Even though you do that primarily for humans, it still has impact from an SEO perspective, because Google sees that behavior. So
yeah. And then the nice thing is like, even though you have two audiences, right? You have the robots, you got the Googles, and you got the people that you want to attract that Google's the gatekeeper of. Essentially, the things that Google wants to see, like as far as how a page is laid out, how H1 and H2 and the structure works, and how bullet points are used, and how alt text is available for your images, all of that is actually highly related to the experience of the user. So they're not apart from each other. They actually intermesh. So I think if we as businesses look at it that way, it doesn't feel like kind of two tasks. It's just one directed group of tasks with two audiences.
Right. Well, and the other thing about the EAT concept is, sure, it was new because it was labeled as EAT, but if you were doing good SEO practices
Yeah.
for the long haul, it was really not a huge change. Obviously, there are some things that you might need to tweak and modify, maybe things that were elevated a little bit more in terms of importance, like authoritativeness and authorship and stuff like that. But I mean, really, it's interesting because as much as things change in the world of SEO, if you just adhere to doing good, solid best practices, you're thorough with it, you're diligent with it, that's going to get you a long way typically. And then obviously, like I said, SEO is not a one and done thing, because you always have to look at it in terms of how are you performing against your competition, and they're not sitting still. So Paul,
Hey,
let's
Ken, hold on,
yeah.
Ken. I just wanted to add to that, because I think that's such a vital thing for businesses to understand, is that, amidst the three of us here as marketing guides, have you guys radically changed? Because I know you've been doing great SEO for years now, and we've been in business now for over 8 years, and we've won awards for SEO and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's part of the three of us's core competencies for our businesses.
Right.
Have you radically changed what you do for SEO?
No, not radically.
Yeah, same here. Like, we add on, we modify, but
Right.
yeah, the fundamentals have remained the same for at least as long as I've been doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of people who do the, things to really where they're pushing the envelope and probably they're not good best practices. They get whacked. I mean, you just know. I mean, if it's too good to be true, if if you do something and it has an immediate impact, chances are you're going to get whacked with it. I mean, you just have to, look at this as a long game. Paul, there's been some discussion about whether or not backlinks still matter. I'd like to hear your thoughts on whether they do or not.
Yeah, they do still matter. Although John Mueller has alluded to the fact that in the future they will matter less. But he didn't really go in depth about that or how they were going to do that, because Google uses backlinks to determine it's part of what they use to determine if your content is authoritative and relevant. And they look at like the age of the domain, age of the linking domain, and how, like, if you have a backlink from a .edu or .gov, that Google's going to give that a lot of authority. If you have,
why is that?
Because they're just considered highly authoritative websites, and if they think your content is good enough for them to link to, Google's going to look at that and say, okay, if it's like Forbes linking to something on your website, if Forbes thinks something on your website is good enough for them to link to, Google's going to take notice of that.
Yeah.
So it's important. I mean, I could get into some technical things, but the number of linking pages, and here's something, and that's, which basically number of backlinks you have. But something that's interesting is that the first backlink you get from an authoritative domain carries like 80% of the weight. And additional links from that same domain mean less. So getting a bunch of links from one high authority domain is going to help you less than getting 2 or 3 links from 2 or 3 different high authority domains.
Okay. So diversity of links and link quality.
Yes. And, and Ian talked about this. If you have bad links or links from spammy websites, or what Google considers spam forms. That can actually hurt you. You need to look at that and disavow them. I don't know that there's some debate on how much weight Google really puts on that, because you can't really control who links to your website. You can go into Search Console and tell Google to disavow them. But at the same time, I mean, that can be a career in itself, So there's some debate on how much Google will actually ding you for. I'm sure they look at it, and if it gets excessive, it will definitely hurt you. But if you have a few bad links, I don't know that Google really is going to penalize you for that.
Yeah,
But,
I think it's going to be probably more the abusers, right? I mean,
right.
there are people who intentionally went out there and just found any old website that literally would give them a link, and
Or they would buy links.
Yeah, buying links, regardless of, the quality of the website, whether it was relevant content, they just wanted to get that link. And, that's a bad practice.
Have you guys come across the comment linking strategy? It's not as popular anymore, but it's a horrible strategy where it's very spammy, where you find websites that allow you to leave a comment to a blog post, and you have some crap content in your response, your comment, and then you have a link to a website. And this,
yeah,
we took over a website, I want to say like 6 years ago, and they had amazing backlinks at the time, but they were all, the previous SEO company had done this black hat strategy, and it ended up starting to hurt them, right? Because Google started to zone in on that as something that was a penalized type activity. And so, we had to disavow all of those backlinks because they were crap.
Yeah, definitely.
But at one time it worked.
Yeah.
And one thing, if you're linking out, this a little off topic, but if this goes for both internal links and if you're linking out from a page or post on your website to another website, and you should do that. A lot of businesses say, well, why would I link to another website? Well, you don't want to link directly to your competitor probably, but it sends signals to Google. But what I've seen is, and you shouldn't do this, you have what's called anchor text. That's what people click on to go to another page. And you're trying to get your page to rank for a particular key phrase, and you use that key phrase as the anchor text to link out to something else. I see it all the time. And don't do that. That's a bad thing.
Why?
Because it dilutes the authority. So you're sending mixed signals to Google. It's like, okay, it looks like you want your page, your content to rank for this topic, this key phrase, and that's a whole nother issue, topic versus key phrases. And yet you're using this anchor text to link out to another page.
With the same keyword.
Exactly.
Yeah. So keyword cannibalization.
Yeah, I guess you could call it that. To me, keyword cannibalization is if you have two pieces of content that you're trying to rank for the same key phrase or the same keyword. But yeah, I guess in a way it is that, because you're basically sending mixed signals to Google.
Yeah. Ian, let's talk about directories. I mean, several years ago, there was a huge buzz. You got to have the name, address, phone number, and therefore you got to be on multiple directories and be on as many of these as you can. Is that still right? Is what's changed, if anything, in regard to directories, and how those links either help or hurt or could hurt from an SEO perspective?
Sure. Yeah. My viewpoint is that nothing has changed. I think just like Paul has said, sometimes Google
Nothing ever.
Yes, things change, but just like Google, through their channels of people, sometimes give directional thoughts like this doesn't matter as much, or like they're during discussions, right? Like, no, Google never comes out and says, hey, here's all the factors and here's what's not working anymore. So it's always what I find is that, and just so our listeners know, like, this is the stuff we in the industry geek out on. You guys don't need to worry about half of this stuff, right? Whether it's controversial or not, just stay away from black hat stuff, which is obviously black hat, and focus on what, hiring a good SEO company usually solves all this for you, because they do banter around about what's working and what's not. But the anecdotal evidence still suggests directories are valuable. And just to give a little context, so directories are anything. They could be Yelp. Essentially Google Business Profiles is a form of directory, but Google loves Google and it's their directory. So you better darn well be there. But,
Right.
excuse me. Like, there are thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of directories out there. And the key is to get on the ones that are the biggest and the most relevant and the ones that have the most authority to pass on to you, for two reasons.
Or industry specific.
Or industry specific, yeah. And you raised the idea of NAP, Ken, and that's name, address, phone number. Having that consistent across the internet is absolutely still vital. If you send different information to Google about your location, your phone number, and one of the things that pops up a lot is that we use tracking numbers, right? When we're doing source attribution, we're trying to figure out, like, okay, where does this lead come from? Did they come from organic traffic? Did they come from paid traffic? Did they come from social traffic? Whatever. And so we use substitutive phone numbers so that we can track, like, that person came through Google Ads and they phoned us. And so people get a little hung up that, how does that affect my NAP? But Google's created, ways around that help us as marketers to be able to still, not run into NAP issues. But, if you have suite spelled as an acronym, or suite spelled fully for, I'm at suite 200 in my location, that just raises red flags for Google, which can, lower its perception of your, we're a legitimate business. We care about the details. This is where we're located, right? So I absolutely do think directories are still valuable. I wouldn't throw them out. It's a pretty low cost part of the whole SEO delivery, and it's still really valuable.
Yeah. So, I mean, beyond just the NAP information, I mean, just the fact that another website sends a signal to the search engine to say, yeah, here's information about this business, is valuable stuff. And, are directory links the same as a link from a website like Forbes or something like that? Or, are they in a different classification?
They are. Yeah. It's not the same type of content. So that's a really good question. Yeah. And yeah, just, because we're in the industry, we know what the high value directories are that any business should be in. And, right. That's the most important part. And just to stay on top of them,
yeah.
keep
local directories as well. I mean, a lot of people are like, chambers of commerce typically are going to carry a lot of domain authority in a local market. And so it's always a valuable link if you're a member of a chamber, if they're linking back to your website.
And why do you think that is, Ken? Why do you think a chamber has power like that?
Because I think that they're seen as trusted sources.
Yeah.
I mean, their job is to represent businesses, and a lot of people confuse chambers with Better Business Bureaus in some cases, or even tourism centers and things like that. But every chamber is different. I mean, in some cases they may have all of that. In some cases they may just literally be focused on being the business association, but it's organized around an association. And association websites, if they're relevant to your business, local or the type of business that you do, they usually are some of the most valuable directories that you can be in.
Yeah.
So, Paul, let's talk about, this is kind of some of the answers I think you're going to give here are probably an evolution of what we were just talking about. What else is important for a business's SEO? that we haven't really talked about,
Yeah.
or need to elaborate more on?
Yeah. And well, just to touch on what the question you asked Ian about directory links, there's content links and there's non-content links.
Mm.
And the directory links are non-content links. Not that they're not important, but they don't carry the same weight as a content link does, which is a link from another website in a piece of content that they have on their website and they link back to you. It's a link within a piece of content, as in a blog post or a page,
Right.
not just a directory listing. But yeah, it's kind of all these things we've been talking about. Internal links, we've talked about that because Google tries to crawl your website the way a person would navigate through your website. And that's where internal links are really important. And they help Google navigate your website. They help the user navigate your website. They're an indication to Google what's important. We talk a lot about pillar pages or hub pages. And if you have you have this hub page and then you have your supporting pages, and they should link back and forth to one another, but ultimately you're going to have more links from these supporting pages pointing back to your hub page. And that tells Google page is really important. And that's the page you really want to rank, because someone lands on that page. Now you have links to all those supporting pages. They can find them very easily. And it goes to something we call orphan pages. And you see this with, service pages or service area pages where they're important. It's not really something that you're trying to rank from an SEO perspective, probably, but you still have to have a link. You still have to some way link to those pages so that Google can find them. You probably don't care so much if a person finds them, but you're telling Google this area is important to my business. And I provide this service in this area, and that's going to help you in local search and in Google Maps. And that's why doing posts on your Google business profile and linking back to a relevant page to whatever that post is, you're sending a signal to Google saying this page is important, or that this service, this area is important for my business. And so that interconnectedness, as we call it, is extremely important. It's the same thing with your social media profiles. Ian talked about video earlier. If you're doing video, you should link back to relevant content on your website. The whole idea is to get people and Google to your website. And so people know this is what we do. These are the areas we serve. And, talking about Google Business Profile, you need to keep that updated. A few years ago, Ken, you and me went to we looked up this restaurant. We're going to go there for lunch. And according to their Google, it was Google My Business at the time, they were open, and we get there and they're closed. It's like, well, I'll never go there again. They don't care enough to let people know when they're open or closed.
Yeah.
These things are important. And it's not just important to people, it's important to Google. If your information is wrong, Google's going to say this website isn't that important.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that they can get by with either like a Google business profile, or they can get by with a simple website. The reality is, if you're trying to show up in Google Map results, which, by the way, every local business should fight like hell to show up for those, because that's where 60 to 70% of all clicks and phone calls happen. Even though that's a Google Map, the Google Map property is probably most closely equated to the Google business profile. That you only get there when you're optimizing your website and you're doing all of these things. You're sending signals. Google's seeing that the information about your business is listed the same everywhere. You're getting all these citation signals, the non-content signals, from the directories. You're getting content signals from all these different sources. that definitely factors into both your Google business profile and to your website if you connect them and you actively manage them in conjunction with each other. If you don't, it may happen, it may not. You may get lucky, but you probably won't. And we haven't even talked about reviews, which is, that's a real specific thing to do, for your Google business profile. But reviews, as Ian mentioned, again, they're signals that send trustworthiness signals to Google when they're wanting to check, when they're trying to figure out, okay, well, here's a bunch of reviews where people are raving about this business. Here's the business's website. Okay, they look like they're a quality company that delivers on the promise that they make to their clients.
It's social proof.
Yeah.
And Google's algorithm has evolved, and nothing exists in a silo anymore. Not too long ago, you didn't necessarily have to do a lot of these things to rank, and you could do things that now will get you in trouble with Google. But Google is looking at all these things in an interconnected way. So you can't really ignore any part of this.
Well, it's called the web for a reason, right?
Right.
I mean,
if your competition's ignoring it, then you obviously don't have to do as much. But if they decide
since COVID,
decide not to ignore it anymore,
right. But yeah, like Ian said, I mean, with so many businesses saw just an explosion of their business over the last couple of years because people had time or money to invest. And the competition levels went way up. People realized I can't rely on my in-person store as much as I used to. Maybe that was the only thing that they were relying on. So they had to make investments in creating aspects of their website that would allow people to take that next step. So, virtual appointments or things like, or even, delivery or takeout, kind of things. So Ian, what, have any last thoughts?
No.
Okay.
Just invest in SEO. Don't blow your brains out trying to figure it all out yourself. I mean, I do understand budgeting. I do understand, you have to put your money where you need to, but find a good, smart SEO provider. They will work with your budget as best as they can to help you where you're able to invest now, in the hopes of helping you attract more business so you can invest more of that back into your SEO smartly. And if you do that, you will continue to get better and better results at this, and organic results have a much higher ROI for the business than most other sources. So don't get caught in the paying per lead thing that I see so many businesses going for. Yeah. Do take a balanced approach.
Well, they're trying to press the easy button. Yep. And yeah, it may work in the short term, although paid ads are far less as effective as an organic strategy. As I just mentioned, 60 to 70%. What's that?
They're getting more expensive.
They went up 300% in the last year.
Yeah. And, 60 to 70% of people click on the Google Maps results for local businesses. Only 10 to 20%, and I think it's more like 10%, are clicking on paid ads. And once you stop paying, they go away. So Ian, you mentioned a key word, and that's investment. SEO is an investment. It's building the infrastructure of your business in regard to how it's found and perceived online. And if would you hire somebody to build your house and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to build your house without hiring an architect and developing blueprints to build the house? You may. I think you're going to regret it pretty fast. So this is super important. With that, we're going to wrap up. Thanks so much for listening, and we'd love it if you would share this podcast with your friends or colleagues. Maybe not your competitors if you're so inclined, because you want to get ahead. But anyway, Ian, take us out.
Yeah, until next week, invest wisely in your marketing and keep calm and market on.